Now I want to turn our attention to a different form of health. I want to talk about this in a way that maybe synchronizes a little bit of what we heard yesterday from Thomas Friedman when he was, if you recall, articulating a vision of what the future needs to be for the health of our democracy and the survival of, basically the survival of human beings on the planet. And that idea was neighborliness and accepting the notion that we have to exist in some kind of harmony because we are all going to rise or fall together. And what I saw, at least in part, in Dr. Topol's presentation was a bringing of that thought down to the level of the human body, where we also have to think about our bodies working in harmony and these systems that we have sort of taken for granted. Now we're beginning to realize the ways in which they work in concert with each other, kind of like we're realizing at the global level. And now I want to talk about how this applies to us in the context of how we get along with each other and the ways in which we actually do this and see each other in collaborative and partnership ways at a time when there is so much division and antipathy in the body politic and in the global scene, as well as in local communities. So when we were thinking about how we approach this kind of look at working in harmony and creating community, we could not think of a better speaker than the next one that I'll be sitting down and talking with, Julie Platt, who is a philanthropist, a university trustee, leader in the Jewish community, and somebody who has thought about and talked about these issues extensively. So it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Julie Platt. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. I really appreciate you being here for this conversation.
And although I feel like I'm going to ruin everything you just had in that last session and just increase your anxiety, but it's all good.
You know, I for those of you who were here for Thomas Friedman's talk yesterday, he gave me whiplash at least twice. So everybody in the audience is used to it. But I really want to explore this concept of how we exist with each other and see and hear each other at a time when there are so many perceived divisions, and what that looks like to bridge that and yet still be who we are at our core. So maybe a place to start is by just sharing with you something that I know you know, but that in San Diego, we just recently experienced the death of, the murder of 3 men at the Islamic Center here. So a concrete and tragic occurrence of Muslim hatred, anti-Muslim hatred in our community. We're also every day experiencing in this community and around the country rising rates of actually record levels of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hatred, and a permission structure around various types of hatred based on race and ethnicity of all types. And I really was struck at the memorial service for the 3 victims of the Islamic Center shooting. How many speakers, despite what had happened in their community, spoke about needing to lean into, again, love and community and faith and belonging in a way that they maybe hadn't articulated so strongly before. And I'm wondering, from your experience, having worked on these issues, at a time when fractures feel so raw across so many communities, what does the concept of belonging feel like, and what does it what does it feel like to actually try and encourage it in others?
So that's a loaded question with many, many parts to it, and I'll try to address it. I think one of the most impactful things that I've heard of late actually was something said by my son Jonah, who said part of being an ally in this moment is being an ally when no one else is in the room. In other words, it's very easy to show up and express your solidarity when you're sitting next to a member of the Jewish community or the Muslim community who's just been attacked. What's a little less easy is when they're not in the room. And when you hear something or someone does something egregious, to speak up when the aggrieved party is not in the room. So part of what I encourage all of you to do, you hear the expression, see something, say something, and I'm talking here about hate. When you see something, I don't care who's in the room, and particularly when the person who is being expressed hate against is not in the room, use your voice. One of the most tragic things to me, and I think you'll find it, I hope you'll find it shocking, is that in 2025, Jewish communities across North America spent $750 million on physical security. Those were private funds extended so that we could observe our faith. Nobody should have to pay to observe their faith. And everyone should freely belong in any house of worship or faith without fear. So let me say a second thing about that. I think it's almost impossible for me to project what it feels like to experience anti-Muslim hate, anti-Black hate. I am neither of those things. So you must be open and listen to the expression of the party who is feeling it and not try to impose what you think it feels like. I have a very difficult time with someone thinking they understand what it feels like right now to be a Jew. And I've had this conversation. I am lucky enough to be in community with Van Jones, working on Black Jewish relationships. And Van and I have spoken a lot about, help me understand, Van, what it feels like to experience racism. And he often asks me, what does it feel like to experience Jew hate? I know you all that know the name Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl also, thankfully, is a very close friend of mine. And she told a story on a national stage, so it's not private. She was taking a walk in 2025 with a dear non-Jewish friend. And she asked her if she would hide her. If it came to that in California in 2025, would she hide her children and she and her husband? That's what it is to express what it feels like right now to be a Jew. And in order for us all to belong in the same society, we have to allow the person who's feeling it to express it so we can try hard. We won't get it right all the time, but try hard to understand what it feels like and not to try to imagine it, but to ask.
I think that is beautiful, actually, beautiful. And I think it is, in some ways, contrary to how we typically behave, because I think people immediately want to, if they want to be supportive, they want to immediately step in and say, oh, I get it. And I think part of what you're saying is, part of understanding is to acknowledge that you don't get it.
That's right.
So we're living in a time when, just having this conversation feels dicey. The idea of identity is under attack on the national stage in all kinds of ways, and identity, for folks who were here yesterday, we heard many beautiful examples of identity coming to the fore and being used as a source of empowerment and strength in people feeling like they belong and like they had found their purpose. So it feels in many cases like it beautifully holds communities together for those of us who are paying attention. And yet, it also feels like it can terribly pull us apart. And as a force for holding others at bay and refusing to engage in conversation with them. And I know you've dealt with this from multiple positions in your role as in Jewish leadership, in the university trustee role. Got to be interesting. As you know, and certainly as a philanthropist whose work has been about, in many ways, trying to bridge differences. So can you talk with us a little bit about how you hold on to your proud identity and yet at the same time make room for someone whose identity feels very different from yours?
Right. So I think what the Jewish community, and that's my best vantage point because I live it, and I'm engaged in the Jewish community from when I open my eyes until I try to sleep at night, is to sit in community with others. You can't speak from afar. One of the most beautiful things about what Van has tried to do is to have us break bread together, to sit across a table from people who have a different lived experience and try to understand it. What I'm finding difficult, if we're gonna really be transparent about difficult conversations, is the exclusion of the Jewish community in spaces where we used to be. So I'm engaged right now in a lot of conversations around pride. I have 2 queer sons, and they're Jewish and proudly Jewish. And in many pride events across North America, the Jewish community has been asked not to come. And it's the most heartbreaking thing to me to ask my children to choose their identity. Are you going to show up as a queer person or as a Jew? And if you're going to show up as a queer Jew, you're not welcome here. And so I'm trying, and I encourage you to have your radar on. You can disagree with the administration of a government. I am transparent enough to say that I do not agree with everything of our administration in this moment, and I do not agree with everything in the administration in the state of Israel. But I believe in Israel and its right to exist, and I believe that I am a proud American. And the idea that a queer Jew, because their ancestry is in Israel, or they align with the ability and the right of Israel to exist, which in itself is a ridiculous sentence because it just does exist. It's not should it or shouldn't it. It's been a country for 80 years and a homeland for 2,000 and more. To make us choose to exclude us, that is something that I find tragic and heartbreaking in this moment. And there are many spaces where Jews are not allowed. And I find it, I guess heartbreaking is the only word. You would be, I hope, horrified to know that there are healthcare workers, doctors, medical practices who ask if you are Jewish, who will not serve an Israeli American. And I can't imagine that's where we are. So again, I implore you to think about inclusion and not exclusion. I am always surprised with the fact that people don't know that 2 million Arabs live in the state of Israel, happily as Arab Israelis, that there are so many black Jews who are often excluded based on their blackness from spaces and are also excluded because they're Jewish. The inclusion, the need to belong, the welcoming of people must be where we start and cannot be where we end.
I'm thinking about well, first of all, it is, I think, shocking to contemplate that what you're describing with your sons is, and thank you for sharing that personal story. It perfectly illustrates, I think, some of the dynamic of what's going on. But it's shocking to think that it is so widespread a problem, and yet we hear about it every single day. And it is the conflation of politics with identity. And as you try and talk to people about trying to get them to understand this, is the personal story enough, or is there something we can do to connect the personal stories of people that we know, like you, if we're not Jewish, or our own lives if we are, that helps people understand the broader social dynamic and not just the personal story?
It's yes, and it's both. You know, people, all of you, by being here today, are activists in your own right. You showed up, you came, you care enough to listen and to be here. Everybody doesn't have to be an activist on a national stage, but we need activists on the national stage. So last week in Washington, hundreds of Jews showed up to advocate for $1 billion allocation in physical security, in nonprofit security grants, which I remind you go to every faith-based organization, not just the Jewish organizations. Nonprofit security grants are for everyone. So we need advocates who are brave enough or have the time or inclination to do it on the national stage. And then we need the person to sit in your living room and tell their personal story. It has to be all of it. I don't know what will resonate with each one of you or move you or help you or illuminate what's happening right now. It may be, for me, it's often inviting people to Shabbat dinner around my table who are not Jewish to say, let me explain what my tradition teaches, what my faith looks like, dispel any misgivings or misunderstandings you have. And the most importantly, and we all have to do this, is separate our patriotism from our politics. And they're so mixed up right now. And it's disarming to me, and we've got to move past this space where I'm identified in some way that's not a patriotic American and a supporter of the existence of Israel, and not pigeonholed into some anti-space that I can't survive in.
I appreciate your the candor of that response, and you're sharing the emotion that comes with it. And I think this is, to your point earlier, this is often what is absent from these conversations. I'm curious, as you think of, and as you have worked to encourage activism on behalf of not just the Jewish community, but against oppression and against hate, what do you wish the broader American community understood about what it means to be an ally in that fight that many people view as not their fight?
So I'll circle back to the first thing I said, and then I'll say much more about that. I think that one of the things that you probably don't know is how much allyship is happening. And I want you to know that, and I'll just give you a few anecdotes of that. But again, it's about being an ally when I'm not here, after I leave the stage. It's being an ally when there's no Jew in the room, when there's no black in the room, when there's no Muslim in the room. It's being an ally because it's the right thing to do. There is so much work happening. I've called out to you the Black Jewish Alliance that is happening. It's also happening because you're in California. Maybe you read about what happened at Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles. And Wilshire Boulevard Temple is located in Koreatown in Los Angeles. The allyship that sprung forth between the Korean community and the Jewish community was beautiful and continues. The allyship that exists, I belong to a synagogue called Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. We just had the head of the Hindu temple, who represents the 6 Hindu temples in Los Angeles. He is completely an ally to the Jewish community and would do anything for us. And we have gone to his faith community as he has come to ours and brought so many members of his temple. So I have lots of hope that if people see and understand that there are ways for them to be allies, that it's not the outlier who's the ally, it's the outlier who's the hater. It's just loud. It's so loud. I do not believe when I lay my head on my pillow and think, who have I not worried about enough today? That I truly believe that it is the minority. They're just so loud that it's sometimes deafening. But I know and I believe and I imagine it is this group as well that wants us all to get along, that wants this sense of belonging. And what we have to do is be louder. We have to be louder than the haters because they're controlling the airwaves and our social media feed.
Yeah, you can clap for that. I am, one of the things that I think people wrestle with today is the question of, we heard from Thomas Friedman about needing to lean into our neighborliness, to be there for each other, to be community, which means showing up at moments when it's hard. I've also heard people say, we're at a stage where we can't have common ground. And do you experience that in your work? And everything you've said is pushing back against that, but I'd just love you to say a little bit more about that.
I'll say both sides of that. I often, when it's been a particularly difficult day for the Jewish community, will receive texts from people who aren't Jewish, particularly around my involvement at Penn. Will just send me off a text, I'm thinking about you today. You can't imagine how impactful that is. So I encourage you to do that. For whatever community it is that is suffering in that moment, having somebody care about me in that moment is deeply impactful to me. My son, Jonah, has a podcast called Being Jewish with Jonah Platt. It is the most popular Jewish podcast in this moment. And the comment sections would put your hair on end. The expletives, the death threats, the hate leveled against my son, his children, his wife. And Jonah says to me, if you're going to do that, which he encourages me not to do, which is read the comments.
Don't read the comments.
I know, but I'm this protective mother. But anyway, he will say, look at how many followers that hater has. And that follower has, 126. And he'll remind me, they're just alone in their room hating. Don't let it get to you. I'm really bad at that. But the truth is, again, I am deeply impacted by it because they're talking about my child, but I know they're not the majority. I know it. And I just have to keep saying that to myself. We do have common ground. We do love. We do want to love. We do want to be in community together. But what hurts me so much is the people who say things that are so terribly hateful.
I am struck by your example of being the protective mom, reading the comments, and God bless you for putting yourself through that. I'm reminded that the killer in the Tree of Life incident in Pittsburgh, when I lived there, and in that case, 11 Jewish worshipers were killed in a synagogue, and apparently the shooters in San Diego, what they all shared was being inspired in some way, shape, or form by what they were reading on the internet. And they found a cyclotron of hate to to drive their thinking. And hate has an algorithm now.
That's right.
And it's 24/7. For those of us who live in a world of kindness that's based on human interaction, one-to-one, the sort of things you're expressing, of reaching out to somebody who is going through a hard time, or taking a moment to say, I'm sorry for what you must be going through. How can we keep up with the 24/7 algorithm and not feel overwhelmed by it? How do you do that?
So I'll tell you what I do. Don't follow my example. And then I'll tell you what my adult children have done. I have a daughter who's 43 now, and her husband, they've taken themselves off. The damage to their mental health was palpable, and their children felt it. They have 4 boys, and they could feel their parents' angst, and they literally have taken themselves off social media. They can't handle it. They can't handle the hate. I would suggest that those Instagram influencers or news sources that you're smart, if they're balanced or not. If they are not, delete them. Because it's not good for your mental health. It's just not. There are organizations, we at Jewish Federations of North America are working on this so hard to affect the algorithm. But there's a ton of money that predates all this hate that was working on this while we were asleep. And it's going to take a long time to turn it around. So be careful what you're reading. Delete the worst of it. And if it is affecting your mental wellness, get off of it. It's too damaging. It's too hurtful. And it won't do anything for you other than increase your anxiety. And I don't think that's good for any of us.
Yeah. So that's a great practical suggestion for people in this room to act on. And as we wind up, I just want to invite you to share any other thoughts you have for how people who, as we navigate our days and feel overwhelmed by the news we hear and the incidents that cross our paths of people acting in despicable and hateful ways, so as not to feel overwhelmed by it, aside from deleting our social media accounts, what are the practices that we can engage in?
So I'm going to tell you the adage that I live by, and you can interpret it any way you want in your daily life. Ann Richards, if you remember that name, maybe. There's some nods who are as old as me.
Governor of Texas.
Governor
right?
of Texas.
Yeah.
She expressed how I live in, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu for lunch. And so I think whether it's double down in activism, in kindness, in where you show up, I don't believe in take your ball and go home if you don't like what you see. Nothing will happen other than it will continue. And it was the most experienced by me at Penn. People chose, because they didn't like what they saw in that moment, to take their ball and go home. And I doubled down. And Penn has turned around very quickly, but it's a very easy place to go to school right now. And that's because we doubled down. So show up if you're Black in a church where the predominance is not Black. Show up in a Jewish synagogue when you're not Jewish. Show up at a rally because you want to be an ally, or just be kind to someone that you think might be hurting, but double down on it.
Thank you. I think, yeah, thank you. We are unfortunately out of time, but I just want to say that in these very difficult and challenging times, and on this topic, you show so much wisdom, and I just want to express my appreciation for you sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
And for the work you're doing out in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.